Hey everybody, we are going to keep talking about ecology and we're going to focus in more specifically on biomes today. So, biomes are broad geographical regions with characteristic communities of organisms. So it's got characteristic plants and animals within biomes. First, we're going to look at aquatic biomes. We'll start with freshwater biomes. And so these are going to be areas that have less than 1% salt concentration. These are going to be strongly influenced by temperature and light. And they're actually classified based on their water flow patterns. So first we would look at lakes and then wetlands and then streams and rivers and then estuaries. Then we have marine biomes. Marine biomes cover about 75% of the Earth's surface. They on average are about 3% salt and controlled by light and the distance to the shore. With marine biomes, we tend to look at several different areas. So the intertidal zone, ocean pelagic zone, coral reef, and then benthos. This is just a diagram that sort of shows you some of the different important marine biomes and sort of where they're located. So the intertidal zone is up here. This is the oceanic zone. The pelagic zone is really important. You also need to look at the photic zone, which is the area that gets light, and then the aphotic zone, which is much larger, and that's going to be the area where you do not get light. And then the benthic zone is going to be down along the bottom. So again, you've got the light zones. The photic zone is where you have enough light for photosynthesis. Red light is lost really rapidly as depth increases. And then you've got the aphotic zone, which lacks enough light for photosynthesis. And it depends on food that's made in the photic zone for energy. And this is actually part of the most extensive biome on the planet. Then we've got estuaries. This is going to actually be where you've got freshwater river meets the marine ocean, and so you've got very variable salt concentrations, but these are also very productive biomes. Then you've got coral reef, which is characterized by coral. It's going to be found in shallow, warm waters. Again, very productive areas with very high species diversity. Then the benthos is the bottom area. This is usually fed by nutrients that drift down from the upper levels, and again, fairly rich in life. So now, when we look at terrestrial or land biomes, these are going to be controlled by the temperature, the water availability, and geography. This graph is really helpful for looking at what kinds of precipitation and temperature will produce what kind of biome, or where the biomes, I guess, are located based on precipitation and temperature. So here you have your drier biomes all the way down to the wetter ones, and then the cooler ones up to the warmer ones. So if you take a look at desert, it's going to be way far over on the dry side and fairly high up on the temperature scale. Then if you look at something like the tundra, again, it's going to be very dry and quite a bit cooler. So terrestrial biomes, you guys should be able to recognize all, but you want to be able to describe the features of 2 to 3 types fairly well. So you guys are actually going to be doing a terrestrial biome assignment. We'll talk about this a little bit more in class, but just kind of be thinking about this assignment as you are watching this video so that you guys are paying attention to kind of which biomes you like and which one you would like to use for your project. Something I want you to kind of look at on this, you've got the breakdown of all the biomes. It's interesting because you can kind of see bands that go across these continents. So latitude, it plays an important role in these biomes. So like the further up, you can see that you've got tundra way up around the Arctic. Below that, you've got the coniferous forest. And then you've got the temperate deciduous forest, and then it kind of gets a little bit more mixed up when you start looking at different altitudes. But just things to keep in mind. So first one we're going to talk about is the tropical forests. These are areas that are covered with dense growth of trees and vines. You've got warm temperatures, pretty constant day length, and high water. Tropical forests do have the greatest diversity of species on any area on Earth. The soil, though, is usually very infertile because most of the nutrients are actually already in the plant life. This is also one of the most endangered biomes on Earth as well. Next, we've got the savanna. This is going to be grasslands, typically with few trees. You tend to find three growing seasons. You've got cool and dry, hot and dry, and then you've got warm and wet. So they do three different seasons. Savannas tend to be rich in herbivores and predator species, and this is the only major biome not found on North America. So if you're ever like really struggling to remember savanna, think of the Lion King, and that's pretty much what it is. Next, you've got desert. This is characterized by plants that are adapted to dry growing conditions. So the major climate factor here is going to be lack of water. Deserts actually can be hot or cold. I think we tend to think of them more as hot, but even like the deserts that we tend to think of as hot are hot during the day, but cool down quite substantially at night. So the key defining feature of a desert is that it is very, very dry. These are most often found in areas of descending air masses, very low productivity, but still fairly diverse in species. Next, we've got chaparral. Chaparral are characterized by spiny evergreen shrubs. The climate, you tend to see mild rainy winters and hot summers. So the example would be Southern California, also the Mediterranean. So chaparral is maintained by fires. Fire is very, very important to maintaining chaparral. And plants are really well adapted to periodic fires. And so they are able to regrow from the roots, or you also have a lot of seeds that need fire to crack the seed coat in order for them to start growing. Next, we've got temperate grasslands. So you tend to see grasses and other herbs that are the dominant vegetation, kind of intermediate in terms of water availability, and they have relatively cold winters. So this would be what Illinois used to look like. It is the prairie state. Grasslands are very productive for agriculture, so you grow a lot of wheat, a lot of corn. Again, if you ever make the drive down to like any of the state schools south of Chicago, lots of corn, lots of soybean, very boring. They need disturbance in order to keep the trees out, so that disturbance is going to be fire. And you tend to see several types, so tall grass prairie and then short grass prairie. Next, we've got temperate forests. This is where you have the deciduous trees. The climate is going to be relatively high rain and cold winters. Very little of this natural area is left. Again, this is kind of like we are where the temperate forests are meeting that would be meeting temperate grasslands. That's kind of where we're located in Illinois. That's what it should look like, but again, not very many of these areas left. And pretty good diversity of species in temperate forests as well. Next, we've got the taiga, or the northern coniferous forest. This is when you tend to have the coniferous trees dominate, or like anything that looks like a pine tree. That's kind of like the classic description. So coniferous, like a cone, like a pine cone. So that's what you guys should be thinking of. The climate is going to be long, cold winters, very short and wet summers, and a very long summer day length. Very low species diversity here. It's very far north, it's very cold, so you have to have species that are really well adapted to that cold weather. And these areas are actually being logged at a pretty alarming rate as well. And then we've got the tundra, so this is where you're going to see grasses and sedges dominate. The climate, you're going to have very cold and dry, low light in the winter. You're going to have permafrost present. Plants are going to stay pretty short, and then very poor species diversity. So as we're thinking about climate and how climate affects biome distribution, something to pay attention to are altitude and latitude. So I kind of talked about latitude a little bit before. These two tend to mirror each other. Their biomes are similar because the environments are similar. So like the higher you go on a mountain, the higher your altitude gets, you tend to see areas that are very similar to areas that have a very high latitude. So your summary for this chapter, you guys should know what is involved with the study of ecology, know the major factors of planet Earth that shape the climate. You should know the major aquatic and terrestrial biomes and the factors that control them. So your lecture question for today, how does the amount of precipitation affect biome distribution? So please send me a message via the class website with your answer. Thanks, guys.